They sold my ranch while I was serving overseas. But they didn't expect me to come back. The plane touched down at Dallas, Fort Worth just before dusk. The air inside the cabin was heavy, recycled, and stale. But when the wheels screeched against the runway, I felt something inside me break loose, like I'd finally exhaled after 11 long months of holding my breath. I was home, or at least I thought I was. The terminal smelled like coffee and fast food. Soldiers were hugging their families, kids waving little flags. I walked past them with my duffel bag on my shoulder, still in uniform. Boots scuffing against the tile, heavy with dust that would never wash out completely. I didn't stop for anything, just went straight to the lot where my truck had been waiting all year. The sight of it calmed me, the old Chevy, faded blue paint, dent on the left bumper. It was the one piece of home I had been sure wouldn't change. I pulled onto the highway heading west, windows down. Texas evening air rolled in, warm and thick, carrying the faint smell of mesquite. Every mile closer made me feel lighter. I could almost see it. The wide stretch of sky, the porch swing my father hung when I was a boy, the oak tree where I carved my initials. For months I'd been building this picture in my mind. It had got me through desert nights, through the sound of mortar fire, through silence after orders barked too sharp. Home, my land. By the time I turned down the gravel road, the sun was sliding low. Shadows stretched long across the fields. My heart pounded as I pulled into the drive. And then I froze. There was a minivan parked where my truck should have been. Children's bikes leaned against my fence. And through the front window, curtains I didn't recognize, toys scattered on the floor of my living room. My living room. I sat there for a second, engine idling, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles burned. First thought, wrong place. But that was impossible. I knew every inch of this ranch. My father had built it. I grew up here. This was my land, and strangers were living in it. I cut the engine, stepped out. Boots crunched against gravel. My throat was dry. The screen door creaked open, and a woman stepped out holding a toddler on her hip. She looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. "Can I help you?" she asked. I straightened my shoulders, duffel still slung over me, uniform stiff with desert dust. "This is my house. Who are you?" Her grip on the child tightened. She shifted, uneasy. "I think you're mistaken. We bought this house 6 months ago from the HOA." The words slammed into me harder than any bullet. The HOA. "No," I said, voice sharp, steady. "My name is Quentin Ralston. This ranch has been in my family 3 generations. I didn't sell it. And I sure as hell didn't give anyone permission to." The woman's face softened into something almost apologetic, but her words cut all the same. "Look, we have the paperwork. We paid for it. If you've got a problem, you'll need to take it up with the HOA." I turned away before my anger spilled out. 11 months of dust, sweat, and blood overseas, and this was how I came home. Not to my porch swing, not to my father's oak tree, to strangers, to paperwork, to theft signed off with a pen. I climbed back into my truck and drove, barely noticing the road. My father's words echoed in my head. "Land's the one thing they can't make more of. Protect it. Always protect it." He fought through droughts, recessions, winters that nearly broke us to hold on to this place. And now, while I was away serving, it was stolen. At the gas station on the edge of town, I pulled in under the flickering neon sign. Killed the engine. Just sat there with my forehead pressed against the steering wheel, hands shaking. A year in a combat zone hadn't cracked me, but this did. I dug out my phone and called the only man I trusted, Luis Navarro. We grew up 2 miles apart. He stayed, became a sheriff's deputy. If anyone would know what to do, it was him. "Ralston," his voice jumped with surprise. "You back?" "I'm back," I said, "and apparently I don't have a house anymore." "What are you talking about?" "The HOA sold my ranch. There's a family living in it right now. They said they bought it through Brenner." Silence, then a muttered curse. "Jesus, you need to come by the station. Bring whatever paperwork you've got. Don't go confronting anyone. The last thing you want is to end up in handcuffs the day you get home." I forced a dry laugh. "Handcuffs, Louis, I just want my house back." "I know, but trust me, this is bigger than it looks. If Brenner pulled this once, she's done it before." His words chilled me. Bigger than it looks. I hung up and leaned back in the seat, watching the neon flicker across the hood. My anger hardened into something sharper, determination. They'd taken my home, but they hadn't counted on me coming back to fight. What I didn't realize was that the ranch was only the beginning. They thought I'd just walk away. They didn't know who they were dealing with. The next morning, I drove straight into Weatherford. The streets were familiar, but I didn't feel at home. Storefronts I'd known since childhood seemed smaller, more hollow. My boots carried dust from Kuwait, but every step now felt heavier, like I was walking into enemy territory. The HOA office sat squeezed between a dentist's clinic and a feed supply store. Small brick building, a flag out front drooping in the heat. I parked, still in uniform. Partly because I hadn't had time to change. Mostly because I wanted them to see it. Wanted Sylvia Brenner to look me in the eye and see the soldier whose land she'd stolen. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old carpet and burnt coffee. A receptionist sat behind the counter, eyes glued to her screen. "I need to see Sylvia," I said. My voice didn't waver. "She's in a meeting," she muttered, barely glancing up. "Then tell her staff Sergeant Quentin Ralston is here. About the ranch she sold out from under me." That made her look, wide eyes, quick swallow. She disappeared down the hallway without another word. When she came back, Sylvia was with her, exactly as I remembered. Silver hair pinned tight, sharp suit pressed crisp, glasses resting low on her nose. She carried herself like a queen surveying her subjects. "Well," she said, folding her arms, "I wondered when you'd be back." "You sold my ranch." My words were flat, heavy. "Correction," she replied, lips curving into a thin smile. "The HOA sold it. After you failed to address repeated violations and delinquent dues, you abandoned the property, Sergeant. The board had no choice." Heat surged through me, but I forced my voice steady. "I didn't abandon anything. I was deployed. Federal law protects service members from exactly this kind of stunt, and I paid every cent before I left." Her smile didn't flicker. "That's not what our records show." "You forged something, then." The receptionist shifted nervously behind the counter. Sylvia raised a manicured hand. "I suggest you calm yourself. Raising your voice won't change the fact that you lost that property months ago. Perhaps you should take it up with your lawyers instead of harassing me." Every instinct in me wanted to slam my fist on the counter, to shake her out of that smug composure. But I didn't. I turned on my heel, boots echoing off the tile, and walked out into the blinding Texas sun. She wasn't rattled, not at all. That told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't her first time pulling something like this. Later that afternoon, I sat across from Luis Navarro in the sheriff's office. He poured 2 cups of coffee, slid one across the desk. The room smelled of paper and old leather chairs. "You were right," Luis said. "I checked county records. There's a transfer on your ranch filed like it was legitimate, signed off by the HOA board, but your signature not on anything." My stomach tightened. How'd they do it? "They pushed it through as a lien foreclosure, claimed unpaid dues and violations. Thing is, the amounts don't add up. They're inflated, way inflated, and your payments, I found receipts, you were current." I slammed my fist against the table. "So they stole it." Luis nodded grimly. "Pretty much, and if they did it to you, I guarantee you're not the first." Memories hit me like a flood, the family I saw in my house, the woman on the porch clutching her child. They weren't villains. They were victims too, bought a stolen home with forged papers. "Not this time," I muttered. Luis studied me carefully. "Look, I know you're angry, but you need to play this smart. Go through the Army's legal channels. You're covered under the Service Members Civil Relief Act. If you push it right, you won't just get your ranch back, you'll burn their whole scheme down." I leaned back, exhaled slowly. Burn their scheme down, that's exactly what I intended. That night I drove to Mineral Wells to my sister Emma's place. She was 5 years older, stubborn as a mule. When I walked in, she already had a pot of chili on the stove. Refused to let me say a word until I'd finished a bowl. Finally, she set her spoon down with a clatter. "They sold Daddy's land." I nodded. Her eyes flared. "Over my dead body." "I'm getting it back," I said, "and I'm making sure they can't do this to anyone else." Emma's voice softened, but her eyes burned. Good, because if Daddy were alive, he'd be down there flipping tables himself. We both laughed, rough, tired, broken laughter, but it eased something inside me. I pulled a folder from my duffel bag, spread receipts, letters, notices across the table. Army JAG office will have my back. Once they dig into this, Sylvia's little kingdom is going to crumble. Emma tapped one of the receipts. You better believe it, and when it happens, I want front row seats to watch her carry her boxes out of that office. I smiled, but my stomach still churned. This wasn't going to be simple. Sylvia had power, connections, years of practice, but she hadn't counted on me coming back. And already whispers were surfacing. Families who'd lost their homes the same way. And the storm that Sylvia thought she controlled, it was about to break wide open. They thought I was just one man. But I wasn't alone. 2 days later, I walked into the Judge Advocate General's office at Fort Cavazos. The building buzzed with printers and clipped voices, soldiers in uniform walking past lawyers in pressed suits. My folder of receipts felt heavier than any rifle I'd ever carried. A captain with sharp eyes and a calm voice introduced herself as Renee Whitfield. She motioned for me to sit, then began flipping through my paperwork. Her fingers moved quickly, eyes narrowing at each receipt. You kept good records, she said. That helps. From what I see, this falls under the Service Members Civil Relief Act. It's designed to prevent exactly this kind of abuse while you're deployed. So I'm covered, I asked. Legally, yes, she said, but cases like this can drag. HOA boards often think they're untouchable. They count on service members being too far away or too tired to fight. I leaned forward. I'm not too tired. I want them held accountable, not just for me, for everyone they've done this to. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. If there's a pattern, we'll find it, and if it's fraud, they'll answer for it. That night, I sat in a cheap motel room off I-20, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. Sleep didn't come. My mind replayed the woman at my front door, the unease in her voice as she claimed my house as hers. She wasn't the enemy. She was a pawn, but the image burned in my chest. The next morning, Lewis called. His voice was urgent. You're not going to believe this. Since you showed up, we've had 3 more complaints. Families saying the HOA forced sales over supposed unpaid dues. Same story every time, fees piling up out of nowhere, then suddenly their house is gone. My grip on the phone tightened. Names. I've got 2 right now, Franklin Ortega on Mesquite Drive and the Hallbrooks on Ridgeway. Both lost their places in the past year. You want to talk to them? I do, set it up. That afternoon, I sat across from Franklin Ortega at a diner that smelled of grease and coffee. He was in his 50s, grease under his nails from years as a mechanic. He stirred his cup like it was the only thing holding him together. They said I owed $10,000 in dues, he muttered. 10 grand. I've lived there 20 years, never missed a payment. But suddenly they're adding fees, penalties, interest. I couldn't keep up. Then a notice shows up. 2 months later, the place is gone. Sold to who? I asked. He shook his head. Some couple from Dallas, paid cash, real quiet like it was lined up from the start. My gut twisted. Too clean, too rehearsed. That evening, I met the Hallbrooks in their cramped apartment on the edge of town. Retired teachers, worn thin. Mrs. Hallbrook's voice trembled as she spoke. They told us we violated lawn maintenance rules. Said we owed for repairs we never requested. Next thing we know, we're standing in front of a judge who says the HOA has the right to foreclose. We didn't even understand what was happening until it was done. Her husband added, hands trembling, we thought maybe it was our fault, that we'd done something wrong. I shook my head firmly. It wasn't you, it's them, and I promise you it's going to come out. For the first time, their tired eyes flickered with something, hope. Later that night, I sat in my truck outside the ranch. The porch light glowed softly. I could see shadows of the new family moving inside. They weren't villains. But the sight hollowed me out. That was my father's porch swing, my family's land. And now I knew it wasn't just about me. Sylvia Brenner wasn't just ruthless. She was running a racket. A machine that chewed through people's lives and spit them out, all while the courts looked the other way. I pulled out my phone and texted Lewis, "This isn't just my fight, it's everyone. We're going after them." His reply came quick, "Then buckle up, brother. Once you start this, there's no turning back." What neither of us knew was that Sylvia had already felt the walls closing in, and she was ready to fight back in ways I couldn't yet imagine. They thought I was bluffing. Sylvia was already planning her counterattack. Inside her immaculate brick home at the end of a Weatherford cul-de-sac, Sylvia Brenner gathered her board around a polished dining table. Papers stacked high, glasses of wine untouched. The air was sharp with tension. "We have a problem," she said, sliding her glasses down her nose. "Staff Sergeant Ralston is back. He's been to the sheriff's office, and now the Army's legal department is sniffing around." Curtis Doyle, wiry and nervous, shifted in his chair. "Can't we just return the property? Call it a mistake?" Sylvia's glare silenced him. "A mistake? If we reverse one, the rest collapse. Do you want to explain to a dozen buyers that their deeds are worthless? Do you want lawsuits crawling over us from every direction?" The room went still. Cheryl Masters, another board member, leaned forward. "Then what's the plan?" Sylvia's voice was ice. "We tighten ranks. Every document is in order. Every sale was filed properly with the county clerk. If they accuse us of fraud, we point to the records. As long as we stay united, there's nothing they can do." Curtis muttered under his breath, "Unless someone talks." Sylvia's eyes snapped to him, cold and hard. "No one talks." While Sylvia fortified her empire, I wasn't sitting idle. Captain Whitfield had already filed motions to halt further HOA foreclosures pending investigation. She told me the Army's involvement carried weight in federal court. But this fight wasn't just about law, it was about perception. The more families spoke up, the harder it would be for Sylvia to paint me as an isolated case. Lewis called late one night. His voice was low, almost urgent. "Ralston, you stirred a hornet's nest. People are coming out of the woodwork. I've got 6 new names, families who say they got bullied out of their homes, some too scared to go public, but they'll talk to you privately." "Scared of what?" I asked. He hesitated. "Of Brenner. She's got pull. People say she threatened them with liens, fines, lawsuits. One guy swears his truck got vandalized after he complained at a meeting." My blood boiled. Then we'll give them a reason not to be afraid. The next day, I sat in the back room of a diner with Franklin Ortega and 2 other displaced homeowners. The air was heavy with fried food and coffee, conversations humming around us. "They can't keep getting away with this," Franklin said, voice low but shaking with anger. "People need to see someone stand up to them. Most of us thought we didn't have a chance." "You do now," I told him. "The Army's involved. This isn't just a neighborhood squabble anymore, it's federal. If you're willing to give statements, you'll have protection." One of the others, Patris Nolan, twisted her hands nervously. "I'm scared, Quentin. My husband's health isn't good. We can't afford more stress, more fighting." I leaned in, softening my voice. "I get it, I really do. But think about what they took from you. Think about the next family they'll target. If we don't speak up, they'll keep going. But if we stand together, they can't silence us all." Her eyes glistened. Slowly, she nodded. "All right, I'll talk." Later that night, I drove past my ranch. The new family had left their porch light on. I sat in the dark, watching. They weren't the villains here. They were pawns, but seeing them in my house, my father's house, felt like a blade twisting in my chest. Back in her study, Sylvia picked up the phone. One of her contacts at the county office whispered through the receiver, "The Army filed an injunction today. You'll need to prepare." Sylvia's lips tightened into a thin line. "Let them come," she said. "They won't find what they're looking for." But for the first time, her hand trembled as she set down her glass of wine. For years, she had believed herself untouchable. She hadn't counted on a soldier coming home, angry, armed with the law, and unwilling to be silent. And as I gathered more voices to stand beside me, Sylvia quietly began planning a counterattack that could drag the entire neighborhood into chaos. They thought paperwork would shut me down. Instead, it made me louder. The courthouse in Parker County smelled of old wood and dust when I first stepped inside for the homeowners' testimonies. Captain Whitfield had arranged it, a chance for everyone hurt by Sylvia's board to speak on record. I didn't know what to expect, but by the time I walked into that long oak-paneled room, it was already packed. Men, women, couples, all with folders clutched to their chests like life preservers. Whitfield opened the session calmly. "We're here to document every incident tied to the HOA's foreclosures. The stronger your accounts, the stronger the case." One by one, the voices filled the room. Franklin Ortega, tired eyes behind grease-stained hands, recounted the sudden fees that ballooned overnight. Patris Nolan's voice shook as she explained how Sylvia herself had threatened her family with legal action. The Hallbrooks, those retired teachers, spoke with quiet heartbreak about being railroaded through court, not even understanding what was happening until it was over. Each story stacked on the last, anger turning into something heavier, not just loss, betrayal. When it was my turn, I stood slowly, my uniform jacket brushing the chair. "I was serving in Kuwait when my ranch was taken," I said. "I paid every bill before I left. They claimed I abandoned it. They lied. While I was defending my country, they stole my home." The room went silent. Even those who had spoken leaned in, reminded that this wasn't about missed payments or weeds on a lawn. It was about dignity. Afterward, Lewis caught me in the hallway. He gave a half smile. "You realize people are looking at you now, right? Like their voice." I shook my head. "I didn't ask for that." "You didn't have to," he said. "It's yours now." But Sylvia wasn't bowing under the weight of those stories. Across town in her office, she sat stiff-backed while her board argued. Curtis Doyle slammed a folder onto the table. "This is out of control. Too many eyes on us now." "Calm yourself," Sylvia snapped. "The courts have upheld us before, they'll do it again, unless of course you'd like to confess to wrongdoing." Curtis went pale. Cheryl Masters leaned in, voice sharp. "If someone flips, we're finished." Sylvia adjusted her glasses, voice cool as stone. "No one flips. Remember, we all signed the same papers." Her meaning was clear, but the cracks were showing. The very next week, as I left the courthouse, a man I didn't recognize approached near my truck. Ball cap pulled low, voice quiet. "You'd better back off, soldier. You're stirring trouble that doesn't concern you anymore. Nervous people do desperate things." I stared straight at him. "Is that supposed to scare me?" "It's supposed to warn you." He walked off before I could respond. The sun beat down on me, heat mixing with anger in my chest. This wasn't just about paperwork anymore. Sylvia was pulling strings, and some of those strings were tied to people willing to play dirty. That night, Emma found me packing on her porch. She folded her arms. "What happened?" "Someone tried to warn me off," I said, my voice low, steady. And I'm not backing down. They took Dad's land. They preyed on families who couldn't fight back. If they think I'll scare easy, they picked the wrong man." Emma's eyes softened, but her words cut with truth. "Then you'd better be ready. People like Sylvia don't fight fair." She was right. Because when the first hearing finally arrived in Fort Worth, it wasn't just neighbors watching. News vans lined the street. Reporters waited on the courthouse steps, microphones ready. Veterans groups showed up too, waving flags, saluting. My fight had become a symbol. Inside, I sat at the plaintiff's table with Captain Whitfield, papers stacked neatly at her side. Across the aisle, Sylvia sat tall, sunglasses gone, her expression carved from ice. Attorneys flanked her like bodyguards. The judge entered. The air in the room tightened. Whitfield rose first, her voice calm, precise. "Your Honor, this case is not about a single home. It's about an abuse of power that targeted multiple families under false pretenses. Staff Sergeant Ralston was deployed overseas when his property was wrongfully foreclosed upon by the homeowners, association led by Mrs. Brenner. We will present evidence not only of his payments, but of a pattern of fraudulent tactics against others." Sylvia's attorney countered smoothly. "The HOA followed all proper channels. Mr. Ralston failed to meet his obligations as a homeowner. Our records document unpaid dues, violations, and a lawful foreclosure process. This is not fraud. It is enforcement of community standards." I clenched my fists under the table, wanted to shout, but Whitfield's steady hand on my arm reminded me, patience. One by one, the witnesses spoke. Franklin, Patris, the Hallbrooks, each painting Sylvia's empire in darker strokes. Through it all, she never flinched, stone-faced, whispering to her attorney, mask intact. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand, swore in, and told my story. The deployment, the payments, the shock of finding strangers in my home. My voice didn't rise, but it carried weight. I served 11 months in Kuwait, I said, locking eyes with the judge. I was protecting this country, and I came back to find my father's land stolen, not because I failed, but because someone decided my absence made me an easy target. For the first time all day, the courtroom fell utterly still. Even the reporters stopped typing. By the end, the judge issued a temporary injunction. All HOA foreclosures tied to Sylvia's board were suspended pending full investigation. Not victory, not yet, but a crack in her fortress. As we stepped outside, reporters swarmed, microphones thrust forward. Staff Sergeant, how does it feel to finally face Mrs. Brenner in court? Do you believe you'll get your ranch back? Do you think this is fraud on a larger scale? I paused on the steps, the weight of cameras and eyes pressing down. This fight isn't just mine, I said. It's about every family told they didn't matter. Today proves they do. The crowd erupted. Veterans saluted, families wept, cameras flashed. And somewhere behind the glass doors, Sylvia Brenner watched, eyes narrowed, lips pressed thin. She wasn't finished. And she had friends in places I couldn't yet see. They couldn't beat me with lies on paper. So they tried lies about me. The week after the injunction, everything changed. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls from newspapers, veterans groups reaching out, neighbors I barely knew offering handshakes and prayers. For the first time since stepping off that plane, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. But with every show of support, the pressure grew heavier. Sylvia knew she was losing ground in the courtroom. So she turned to the battlefield she knew best, rumors. It started quietly. A blog post questioning my mental stability, a whisper in town about me being aggressive. Then came the local gossip. Ralston's unstable, can't handle himself after overseas. I ignored it at first, but when an old acquaintance stopped me in front of the hardware store, put a hand on my shoulder and asked softly, "You doing all right after everything over there?" That's when I realized the smear campaign was working. Rage built in my chest. I stormed straight into Luis Navarro's office, slamming the door behind me. "They're trying to paint me as unhinged," I said, my voice low but burning. "They're dragging my service through the mud." Luis leaned back in his chair, sighing. "That's Brenner's playbook. If she can't beat you with rules, she'll beat you with rumors. She's messing with the wrong man." "She's gonna regret this," I muttered. "Don't take the bait," Luis warned. "The worst thing you can do right now is give her a reason to say she's right. Keep calm, let Whitfield handle it." I paced the floor, fists clenched, every muscle in my body screaming to fight back. But Luis was right. Losing my temper would only feed her story. That night, Captain Whitfield called. Her tone was steady, grounding. "I heard about the rumors. Stay focused. We're filing for discovery next week. Once we start pulling their internal records, the truth comes out. That's how we win, not through gossip, but through proof." Proof, that word stuck with me. But proof wasn't always enough to quiet doubt. Every time I saw the faces of the Hallbrooks, or Franklin Ortega, or Patris Nolan, I felt the weight of their trust. If Sylvia's smear worked, if people stopped believing me, we'd all lose. Across town, Sylvia sat in her oak-paneled study, a half-empty wine glass trembling slightly in her hand. Her attorney, Mark Talbot, leaned over a newspaper spread across her desk. "This soldier is making you into a villain," Talbot said, tapping the headline with his finger. "Public opinion sways courts. We can't afford that." "Then shift the narrative," Sylvia snapped. "Make him look unstable, a hothead, fresh back from war, not thinking clearly. People will believe it." Talbot hesitated. "It's risky." "Everything is risky," Sylvia hissed. "But perception wins cases as much as facts." Within days, the whispers had multiplied. Anonymous posts, hushed conversations, suspicious looks in town. The smear spread like wildfire. But so did something else. The veterans. At the next hearing, I walked up the courthouse steps to find a wall of veterans waiting. Old men in faded ball caps. Young ones still wearing their boots. Some in wheelchairs, some leaning on canes. They didn't hold signs. They didn't chant. They just stood shoulder to shoulder in silence, watching me walk through them. It hit me like a punch to the chest. I wasn't just fighting for my ranch anymore. I was carrying all of them with me. Inside, Captain Whitfield handed me a folder. Her eyes flicked with something I hadn't seen before, triumph. "Discovery came through," she whispered. Inside were spreadsheets, payment records, letters on HOA letterhead. At first glance, it looked routine, but Whitfield pointed to the columns. "See here, they logged late fees on accounts already marked as paid. Over and over again. Ortega, the Hallbrooks, even you, they manufactured debt." I stared at the pages, pulse quickening. "So it's not mistakes, it's fraud." "Exactly," she said. "A paper trail, and if we show it across multiple families, it's game over." For the first time in weeks, I felt something stronger than anger. I felt certainty. Back at the diner where it all began, I spread the folder across the table in front of Lewis. He whistled low. "Well, I'll be damned. They cooked the books, and now you can prove it." I nodded slowly. Good, let it burn. But while I sat there tasting the first real bite of victory, Sylvia was already searching for a scapegoat. And one of her own board members, Curtis Doyle, was crumbling under the weight of what he knew. And when he finally broke, the whole empire would crack with him. They thought their secrets were buried. But one of their own dug them back up. Curtis Doyle called Louis Navarro late one night, his voice trembling through the receiver. "I can't do this anymore," he whispered. "Brenner told me to sign things I knew weren't right. Late fees, liens, inflated penalties. It was all orchestrated. She said it was policy. I thought it was legal. But it was." Louis leaned forward at his desk, heart pounding. "Curtis, are you saying you've got proof?" "I've got emails, copies of memos. She knew exactly what we were doing. If you give me protection, I'll testify." The next day, Curtis sat across from me and Captain Whitfield in a windowless conference room. His hands shook as he slid a thumb drive across the table. "This has everything," he said. "Emails, internal notes, instructions straight from Brenner. She told us to target the vulnerable, people deployed, elderly couples, families behind on medical bills. Said they were easy to push." My stomach turned. Easy to push. That's how she saw us. Curtis dropped his gaze, voice breaking. "I'm sorry, I was part of it. I thought it was just business, but it was theft." Whitfield slipped the drive into her briefcase, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. Doyle, if you're willing to testify, this case just became much stronger." News of Curtis flipping spread fast, even before it hit the papers. At the next HOA meeting, Sylvia tried to hold her ground. She stood at the front of the room, gavel in hand, polished as ever. But the whispers were different now, sharper, heavier. A homeowner stood and shouted, "Where's our money, Sylvia? Where's the transparency?" Others joined in, murmurs swelling into shouts. For the first time, Sylvia's mask cracked. She slammed the gavel, demanded order. But the room didn't bend to her anymore. Later that night, she sat alone in her study, ledger books open in front of her. The numbers didn't lie, and now, thanks to Curtis, they weren't hidden. She had ruled this neighborhood like a kingdom for nearly 2 decades, but kingdoms fall. And this time, truth was pulling hers down. By midsummer, the fight had stretched far beyond Parker County. Federal investigators from the Department of Justice arrived, their black SUVs pulling up in front of the courthouse. Men in plain suits stepped out, briefcases in hand, quiet authority in every step. Lewis joined me on the courthouse steps, shaking his head. "Never thought I'd see the feds in Weatherford digging through HOA books." "She brought it on herself," I said flatly. "They all did." Inside, investigators combed through offices, pulling records, tracing payments. Curtis walked them through every forged fee, every manufactured lien. It was all laid out in black and white. One of the agents, tall and clipped in tone, looked me straight in the eye. We've already identified at least a dozen families who lost property under suspicious circumstances. Some of the homes were resold to developers at below-market prices, then flipped for profit. This isn't just HOA abuse. It's fraud, conspiracy, maybe even racketeering. I felt vindicated, but sick too. Vindicated because the truth was finally surfacing. Sick because so many families had already been chewed up in the process. That night back at Emma's porch, she studied me with weary eyes. "You look like you're carrying the weight of 10 men. "Feels like it," I admitted. "Every time we dig deeper, it's worse than I thought. She wasn't just after me. She built an empire on stolen homes." Emma's voice softened. "Daddy always said land shows you who people really are. Some guard it, some exploit it." I stared out into the fields, the sky streaked red with sunset. Guess we know which one Sylvia is. Across town, Sylvia sat stiff-backed at her dining table, her last loyal board member by her side, her attorney pale and tense. "The DOJ is circling," Talbot told her bluntly. "If they press charges, you could be looking at prison." Sylvia's hand tightened around her wine glass. "Prison for enforcing bylaws." "Don't play dumb," Talbot snapped. Curtis flipped. "They've got emails, memos, your fingerprints on everything. The only question is how hard they come after you." Cheryl Masters shifted uneasily. "Maybe we should cooperate, cut a deal." Sylvia's glare was sharp enough to cut glass. "You think I'll sit in a cell while that soldier parades around as a hero? Never. I built this neighborhood. They should be thanking me." But for the first time, her voice shook. And Cheryl saw it. Behind the iron mask, desperation had begun to bleed through. Meanwhile, I got a call from Whitfield. "The investigators want you to testify in Washington," she said. "Your case is becoming the centerpiece of a broader inquiry into HOA abuse. It could set a precedent nationwide." I rubbed my forehead, the weight pressing down. "Washington? I didn't sign up to be a symbol." "You didn't," Whitfield said gently. "But you became one, and symbols matter." That night, I thought of the Holbrooks crammed into their apartment. Franklin Ordega still working late shifts in the garage. Patris Nolan crying as she told me her kids asked if they'd ever have a backyard again. Maybe I hadn't signed up to be a symbol, but I couldn't walk away from what it meant. And as I lay awake, the thought hit me. This fight had started as mine, but it wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to everyone Sylvia had trampled. And now there was no turning back. They thought justice would never come. But the gavel finally fell. The courthouse was packed the day the judge delivered his ruling. Wooden benches creaked under the weight of neighbors, reporters, and families who had been waiting months for this moment. The air was thick. Every cough, every shuffle of paper seemed louder than it should have been. I sat at the front, uniform freshly pressed, hands folded tight on the table. I didn't look at Sylvia Brenner. I didn't need to. I could feel her eyes on me, sharp, seething. When the judge entered, the room went silent. His gavel struck once, echoing through the chamber. "This court," he began, voice steady, "has reviewed the evidence presented. The financial records, the testimony of homeowners, and the internal communications provided by members of the HOA board make one fact clear. The foreclosures carried out under the direction of Mrs. Sylvia Brenner were fraudulent, predatory, and illegal." Gasps rippled across the room. Sylvia sat rigid, jaw clenched, while her attorneys shifted in their seats. "The court hereby nullifies the sales of all properties tied to these actions," the judge continued. "Titles will be restored to the original owners. Furthermore, Mrs. Brenner and complicit members of the HOA board are referred to federal prosecutors for charges of fraud, conspiracy, and abuse of power." The gavel struck again, case adjourned. For a moment no one moved. Then the room erupted. Cheers, tears, reporters rushing down the aisles, neighbors embracing one another. I sat still, chest tight, eyes fixed on the judge's bench, as if I had to hear the words again to believe them. My ranch, my father's land, it was mine again. Emma gripped my arm, her eyes wet. "You did it," she whispered. I shook my head. "We did it, all of us." As Sylvia was escorted out, voices followed her. Some angry, some triumphant. She didn't look back. For the first time in decades, she wasn't in control. Outside, the courthouse steps were alive with cameras and microphones. Reporters shouted questions. Veterans saluted. Families cried. I raised a hand, steady. "I'm not here to celebrate me," I said, my voice carrying over the crowd. "I'm here to celebrate justice. This wasn't about one ranch. It was about every family who was told they didn't matter. Today proves they do." Applause broke out. Flags waved. For them, it wasn't just property being returned, it was dignity. In the weeks that followed, federal prosecutors filed charges against Sylvia and several board members. Curtis Doyle, shaken but resolute, testified under protection. National outlets picked up the story. It sparked debates about HOA abuse, about service members' rights, about what it meant to come home. As for me, I spent long days back on the ranch, clearing brush, fixing fences, walking the land my father had guarded through droughts and winters. Neighbors stopped by, some just to shake my hand. Veterans called, asking for advice on their own battles with HOAs. I didn't have all the answers, but I listened. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the fields glowed gold, Emma sat beside me on the porch swing. "You know," she said softly, "you've become more than just a soldier now. You've become a voice for people who never had one." I looked out at the land, the horizon burning orange. "I never wanted to be a symbol," I admitted. "Sometimes," she said, "coming home means fighting for more than yourself." Her words lingered as fireflies sparked in the dusk. The fight had been long, ugly, exhausting, but it ended with justice. Families had their homes back, Sylvia's empire was shattered, and a message had been sent: no one was too small to matter. I whispered my father's words under my breath. "Land shows you who people really are." Now I understood. Some would exploit it, some would protect it, and I knew which one I had chosen. The headlines faded, cameras left. Life returned to a quiet rhythm. But one truth stayed sharp: silence lets injustice grow. One voice backed by truth can tear it down. Weeks later, another veteran reached out, his HOA threatening foreclosure while he was deployed. I didn't hesitate. I picked up the phone, ready to stand beside him. Because this fight was never just about one ranch in Weatherford. It was about making sure no soldier, no family, no neighbor ever came home to find their life stolen again. And as I leaned back on the porch swing, the weight finally lifted. I felt peace for the first time since stepping off that plane. I had come home, not just to my land, but to my purpose. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.